It's the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napolis with me as always. It's a big day here in the state of Utah. We've got a rivalry game. Of course, it is not the main one between BYU and Utah, but it's Utah traveling up north to Logan to take on the Aggies. Kickoff is at 2:30. Pregame is going to be at 1:30 here on the Zone. And then we're going to have the Utah State pregame on the AM signal. That still starts at 1:30, but big game here locally, Alex.
Huge game. And I think it kind of gets a little bit bigger. I'm sure we'll dive into it a little bit more too, but it gets a little bit bigger when you look at the quarterback situation for both sides, right? This is, per reports, this is most likely going to be Isaac Wilson's first start as a member of the Utah Utes. And then depending on what's going on up in Logan, we might see Spencer Petras take on the Utah, or we'll see the former Utah Ute in Bryson Barnes getting the start against his former team.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is nothing is ever official until kickoff, but the potential is there for a battle of the backups. And I mean, the probability is there for a battle of the backups.
I hope it's Bryson Barnes.
Yeah.
Just for the storyline.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Him going against his former team. Everybody's, I think, for a long time is going to remember that win against USC last year at the Coliseum.
Oh, yeah.
Where Bryson Barnes, the backup, was able to lead Utah to a win over USC. And, you know, people are going to remember that. And so now you have that opportunity to take on your former team and kind of, you know, if you're Bryson Barnes, obviously you're going to want to make a statement.
Yeah. I totally agree. And before we dive too far into the talk about this game, I do want to replay Kyle Whittingham, head coach of the Utes. He joined Hans and Scotty earlier this week to talk a little bit about this game and talk about, you know, that situation facing his former quarterback. And he's still got a lot of love and respect for him. So here's Kyle Whittingham on Hans and Scotty earlier this week.
Hans and Scotty, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Utah and Utah State resumes their rivalry after a long layoff. These two teams back at it. Game coming up in Logan. You'll hear it right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Kyle Whittingham, head coach of the University of Utah, kind enough to join us as Utah prepares for Utah State. And, Coach, look, I know this rivalry doesn't have the same cachet as maybe Utah and BYU, but it's got to be nice. As a guy who played at BYU, coached at the University of Utah, you've faced Utah State a bunch of times. It's got to be nice to resume this rivalry coming up this Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's good for the state of Utah. It generates a lot of interest, and gosh, it's been a while since we have played, and particularly up there. I think it's been 12 years, and so it was a late addition to the schedule. We were scrambling last year to try to fill out that 12th game, and they were good enough to put us on the schedule, and so that is another positive for us to go up there and play the Aggies in the in-state rivalry game.
Well, you're coming out of this Baylor game now, Coach, and you're probably feeling pretty good about the team, but you had a couple bumps and bruises. Can you give us any update on Cam Rising?
No, we don't. Unless it's season ending, we don't give any injury report, so that's our policy, and we'll just stick to that.
So when you look at Utah State, what jumps out at you on film when you see that team and what they bring to the table after their first 2 weeks of the season?
Well, they've had two very different ball games, obviously, and it was a tough sledding at USC last week. USC's obviously a very talented team and much improved on defense, I can say. I've studied that film quite extensively, but so we don't. I don't believe anybody really gets a true feel of who they are until you're in week 4, 5, 6, right in there. That's when you really settle in and decide who your playmakers are and who you're going to be offensively, defensively, and that type of thing. And so I think both us and them are still feeling themselves out and deciding who and what direction they're going to be heading.
Saw you talking at camp or at practice yesterday about the quarterback situation. Isaac Wilson, number 2, let's say he starts in this game. You did mention that Brandon Rose would be number 3. Kind of walk us through how difficult this quarterback hierarchy has been for you to put together, Coach.
Yeah, it has, and spring ball. Sam Heward, speaking of him in particular, wasn't available at spring ball. He didn't transfer until late, so that put him a little bit behind. We still think he's a really good addition to our team, but Isaac being there in spring, and of course Brandon being in the program for 3 years now, gives them a leg up. But it's been a close competition, and then Luke Patari also is in the mix. The young man who played in the Colorado game for us last year. So we feel like we've got a good quarterback room, and it has been a little bit difficult to sort out, after Cam. But Isaac, we still have a great deal of belief in him, and we think he's getting better daily. And it's just a matter of him continuing to absorb Coach Ludd's offense. It's a pretty involved offense, and you got to really study it and be in your playbook constantly to really get it down.
From the outside looking in, we can make judgments on Isaac Wilson and his performance. You guys take a closer look. What receiver may not have ran the right route, or an offensive lineman may not have picked up the block that may have disrupted the play and caused the quarterback to do something that he wouldn't have done otherwise. Overall, how did you evaluate him, and how did he look in that game against Baylor when he had that extended time?
Well, I think he took a step forward based on, or in comparison to the week prior. He seemed to have more command and confidence in himself in that game. Still, a few route structures, as you said. He didn't see the field quite well enough, and had some options to get the ball up the field a little bit more. But he's improved. Like I said, since he's got here, continuing to improve. We believe he has a big upside. He's got a big arm. That's probably his number one attribute, is he can make every throw. He's also got a great deal of athleticism, and the Q run game is something that he excels at as well. And so we'll see where we go with it. But we believe in him. Bottom line, we really believe in Isaac and think he's got a bright future.
So, Coach, let's talk about your running backs a little bit, and just your belief in that running back room. We've seen a mix and match, and we've seen a new name. We've seen some old names, but give us your thoughts on kind of the hierarchy of your running back room, because we've seen a jumble there.
Yeah, excuse me. Well, coming out of this past game, Mekhi Bernard made a strong statement or made a case for RB1, and he's been a guy that's played a lot of good football for us through the years. I believe he was right at the top end of his workload last week, 19 carries, 46 snaps overall, which is about as much as he can handle. But if we can get 19 carries for 130 whatever yards he gained, that's pretty good production. And so he really had the upper hand in last week's game, but we still believe Mike Mitchell's going to be a really good back for us and serve a role. Jalen Glover did not play last week, but you may see him in the game this week. And then Dijon Stanley's got his package of plays that he had really great success with in week one. Didn't show up as much in week two. And then Charlie Vincent came in and gave us a couple nice runs in the game this past week. So we still have got a stable of backs that we think is pretty talented. And if there has been some separation right now, it's Mekhi Bernard slightly separating himself from the pack as the lead guy.
Kyle Whittingham joining us right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Coach, this defense looks just absolutely loaded. You took a little bit of a hit on your depth at cornerback, but overall, just how good can this defense be this year?
Well, they've been really good for 8 quarters, I can tell you that. They've, even though we had a little bit of a lull in the third quarter this past week, gave up a few things, but they have controlled both football games that we've played so far. Stingy against the run, limiting big plays up the field, tackling us very efficiently, and that's something that typically takes a few games to settle into with your tackling, but they've been tackling lights out since game one. One thing we got to do a better job of is we got to get more takeaways. That's something that's been a calling card for us for a lot of years, and given our offense short field situations, we've only been able to generate 2 takeaways in these first 2 games, and so that's something that's got to become more productive in that area.
I was going through my stats yesterday, just taking a look at the conference, Coach, and where everybody stands, and I'm looking down my sacks list. Connor O'Toole checks in at number 1 in the Big 12. Right behind him at number 2, Van Fillinger with 2.5 sacks, and it's like just wash, rinse, and repeat with your defensive ends and pass rushes. Where does this come from? Is it your identification of talent out of high school recruiting? Is it more on the developmental end once you get there? Like, how is it that you're having, top sack leaders every year?
Well, I think it's both of those factors involved. I know our assistant coaches do a great job in recruiting overall as far as evaluation, seeing the upside. And it's when you recruit, it's not from high school. The portal's a little different when you take portal guys. But in high school, it's not where is this kid now? Where can he be in 2 or 3 years? And it's projection. And our assistant coaches do a great job of projecting talent, and getting those guys with the big frames and that can run and that have athleticism. And all we got to do is fine tune a little bit of their fundamentals and technique and slap some weight on them. And that's been our MO for a lot of years. And right now I got to believe we have one of the best defensive end rooms in the country. We've got 5 or 6 guys that are absolutely game ready and guys that would probably be starting pretty much anywhere in the country.
How strange is it going to be to see Bryson Barnes on the other sideline wearing a different uniform, and he's doing for Utah State what he did for you a lot, and that's come in and help out and try to keep the ship righted when a starting quarterback goes down.
Exactly, and we're not sure which one we're going to see. We're not sure if the Petros kid is going to be ready or not. But in any event, Bryson has done just what you said, what he did for us, and has filled in for them. He won a bunch of games for us the last couple of years, and really did some good things. He's a really good athlete. He's a high character individual. He's competitive. And very, very proud of him, and glad to see that he's having an opportunity to play.
Hey, really quick, Coach, I hesitate to ask because we're limited on time, but Cole Becker, 1 of 3 in field goals, a couple missed field goals, and then a bumbled snap, I believe it was, on an extra point. Just talk about the kicking game. Do you have trust and faith in it? Because that Oklahoma State game is going to be crazy coming up in a couple weeks. You might need that kicker.
Well, we do have faith in Cole. He was the 3rd best kicker in the Pac-12 last year from a field goal percentage standpoint. He's got a strong leg. He's a proven commodity. Saturday wasn't his best game. He understands that. Nobody's harder on Cole Becker than Cole Becker. I mean, he's extremely hard on himself, and so he's had a great week of practice so far. We're only about halfway through the week, but he's a guy that we still have a lot of belief in. The 2 field goals, even though they weren't gimmies, they're 45 yards, some of them are in that range. They're ones that he makes probably 80-90% of the time, and then the field goal or the PAT was just a botched hold. We didn't even give him the opportunity to kick the ball, but you're right. Every point's going to count as the season wears on, and that was 7 points right there that we left on the table, and we've got to obviously get that corrected.
Coach, appreciate your time as always. Good luck coming up on Saturday.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Always good to be with you guys. Thank you.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
There you go. A lot of good things to say about Bryson Barnes. So I think, again, we don't want to say anything's official until kickoff. But Cam Rising, unlikely to play, according to Brett McMurphy. He came on JJ and Alex earlier this week. He said he had stitches put on that finger and is circling next week as the return date against Oklahoma State. So that's a big game for the Utes, but of course they've got to take care of business in Logan. Then on the other hand, you've got Utah State coming off a 48-0 loss at USC last week. Bryson Barnes got the start in that one. He didn't look particularly amazing, but the Aggies just couldn't do anything anywhere. It was a real butt kicking. But back in Logan this afternoon, again, 2:30 kickoff. It's exciting. If nothing else, then for the storyline of Bryson Barnes, former walk-on at the University of Utah, who led them to a signature win last season at USC, now gets to face his former team as an Aggie. I think that's pretty exciting, no matter how you put it.
It is. It's very exciting for Utah State. And I think we can kind of have that same conversation that we were having a little bit with Wyoming, where Utah State didn't get invited to this new Pac-12. They're going to come into this one with maybe a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Obviously, Bryson Barnes is going to come into this one with a chip on his shoulder, playing his old team. So, there's a lot on the line, I feel like, for Utah State in this one, man. Obviously, you're at your home stadium. You want to get that win against your fans. It is a rivalry. It's maybe not the biggest rivalry here in the state of Utah, right? That will probably attribute it to BYU Utah. But, I mean, for Aggie fans, this is a huge game, man.
Yeah, and the last time that Utah went up there to Logan and played Utah State, the Aggies won.
Yes.
So it's a big deal. And I'm not predicting that the Aggies are going to win this afternoon here today, but I'm saying that, there's a reason that Utah has not been up there since 2012. And a lot of people didn't think that they would ever go up there again. And you're right, Alex, the Aggies do have a lot kind of going into this game. I mean, they looked dead in the water last week against USC. They want to see something today, and then they're hoping to get back on track. Obviously they're not thinking that they're going to win this, I don't think, right? They're kind of expecting to be 1-2 after this game. Hopefully they're going to go to Temple next week and pick up the win, be 2-2, and then they have a bye after Temple, and then they can kind of reset after such a fast start. Just bang, bang, bang. I mean, USC and Utah back-to-back, that's really tough, no matter how you spin it. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, Utah State, the herd always shows up and shows out, and Jalen Royals is a name that we haven't heard a ton yet. We'll see if they get involved. Bryson Barnes will probably, I'm betting that he'll have an exciting player too, simply because of the factor of, he knows these guys.
He knows these guys, and like I said, man, he's going to want to get out there and steal a win from Utah, because that would probably be, for Bryson Barnes, it's probably the biggest thing, man, is just going out there and stealing a win from Utah.
Yeah. And man, this Aggies team has just had bad news after bad news.
Yeah.
All summer long. And you brought it up earlier. Let's talk about this for a sec. Like getting left out of, the Mountain West teams that are going to the Pac-12. Why was Utah State not chosen for that? Who knows? Who knows the full story? Maybe Utah State was selected and they said no, they wanted to stay in the Mountain West. I don't know what the reasoning is, but maybe that does add an extra chip on their shoulder as far as like, hey, we want to prove that we can be good enough.
If they get this win against Utah, I mean, you're having that conversation, right? We're having that conversation of why not us? Why can't we get invited to this as well? We just beat Utah, right?
Yeah.
But if, on the contrary, if they don't beat Utah and we're talking about a Utah win after this, is Utah State up to that level at this moment, right? Because there was so much change this offseason.
Yeah.
Then there's still a little bit of uncertainty towards the future, right? Where does Nate Dreiling land after all this? What does Utah State look like after this season?
Yeah, it's a big unknown just because of everything that's gone on. And frankly, I don't think we're going to get a lot of answers. And I was worried from the second that this news broke that they were going to move on from Blake Anderson. I was worried that this season would become just a let's get through it kind of deal. Like, let's just get through it. It's going to suck. We're not going to look like we're loving it. And then we'll figure things out at the end of the year. We just got to get through this season. That was my biggest worry. And frankly, I haven't seen anything that's changed that. Hopefully a decent performance against Utah, and then, again, like I mentioned, picking up a win next week, and then maybe make some noise in the Mountain West play. Maybe that'll change things. But right now, from Utah State, I haven't seen anything that's going to make me change my mind yet on these players are just trying to get through the year.
Absolutely. And that's what it seems like. That's what it feels like. Of course, I think when we get into Mountain West play, we're probably having a different conversation, especially if they can string together a couple of results. But for now, I just want to see more from Utah State. I got to see more from this Aggie team.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about Utah a little bit because they've got their own kind of storyline. I mentioned that according to Brett McMurphy from the Action Network, Cam Rising had stitches on his finger, negative x-rays, so nothing's broken. Again, this is an injury he sustained last week against Baylor. He collided with some Gatorade coolers on the sideline, did not return to the game, and then it was Isaac Wilson, the true freshman, who came in and filled in for him. If Cam Rising does not play today, it's going to be Isaac Wilson presumptuously getting the start. Alex, if Isaac Wilson is the starter, what are your expectations from him, from a true freshman that has not really shown much over what amounts to a full game's worth of snaps between the SUU game and the Baylor game?
I'm going to go back to some of the conversations that I saw online where people were talking about it's a little bit different when you're preparing for this. It is a little bit different when, and I mean, Kyle mentioned it too during his weekly press conference. It is a little bit different when your number one is taking 80% of the snaps. I'm hoping that's the case for Isaac Wilson. When you're in when you're in practice, when you're getting ready for the week, getting ready for the game, and you're in there as the number one, taking 80% of the snaps, that hopefully gives you a little bit of confidence to kind of grow in the offense and a little bit of confidence to kind of link up with those receivers and generate more offense. Because, I mean, the reality is Utah stalled out once Cam Rising went out.
Yeah.
We didn't see any fight or any spark from this Utah offense after Cam Rising went out. Now, again, I hope it's different, and I want it to be different under Isaac Wilson now having most of the reps during practice this week, knowing that Isaac Wilson's going to be your starter this week and preparing him during the week for this opportunity. And look, it's a hostile environment. It's going to be a tough matchup for Isaac Wilson to head out on the road at Logan with the Herd for his first start. And so I'm just all the attention is on Isaac Wilson right now, and can he rise to that occasion?
Yeah, I do wonder how big of a difference that's going to make getting the week preparation right. We're just going to assume that Utah, even though they haven't said anything, we're going to assume all along that they were planning on holding Cam Rising out all week. So Isaac Wilson has been getting reps with the ones. Okay, we'll make that assumption. I am curious to see how big of a difference that really makes because, to be honest with you, Alex, watching his performance against SU, watching his performance when he filled in against Baylor and they didn't score any points once he was put in, that to me did not look like he should be the backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. And this is something that, I kind of brought up with Steve Bartle when we talked with him a couple weeks ago. I was like, a lot of people say, oh yeah, he showed throughout camp and throughout spring training and whatever that he's the second best quarterback and that's why he's the backup. Except when I watch him and a lot of people have watched him, like he doesn't look like he should be the backup, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I want answered for me in this game if Isaac Wilson starts. I want him to go out and show me why he is the backup over Brandon Rose, who's been with this program for 2 years, and Sam Heward, who has multiple years of college experience.
Right.
I want to see what the coaches have seen to put Isaac Wilson as the backup quarterback.
Yes. And look, I don't doubt that that's the case, right? I don't doubt that, I don't doubt that he did not show up during spring camp and fall camp, right? Yeah. I trust that the coaches saw something in him, and that's why they've allowed him to do that, to come and be the backup in this situation. However, we need to see that translated onto the game field now. We need to see what they see in practice. We need to see that in a game situation. Like I said, I'm hoping that having 80% of the snaps during the week allows Isaac Wilson to flourish this weekend, just not only for Utah's sake, but I mean for the future's sake of this program, right? Because Isaac Wilson is the future of Utah football.
He's supposed to be.
And if we don't see it in his first start, if we don't see something different than what we saw against Baylor, than what we saw against SU, maybe the whole tone of the season and the future of Utah football changes.
Right. If he comes out and really struggles against Utah State, then you've got some big questions because, number one, you're right there. Like, this is supposed to be their quarterback for the next several years.
Right.
And those questions pop up if he struggles 3 games in a row. And no offense to any program, but SUU, Baylor, and Utah State are nowhere near the level of competition that Isaac Wilson will be playing in the Big 12, right? Mm-hmm. So if he comes out and struggles, that is a big worry on if he really can succeed. And I get that he's a true freshman, and it is a hard transition. And, if that's your point, then I'm going to say, then why is he playing?
Right.
Then why is he playing?
And that is my next question. Are we putting way too much expectation on Isaac Wilson's shoulders? Right. As a true freshman, as a kid who just came out of high school, are we putting too much expectation on Isaac Wilson?
Yeah, and naming him the backup right away, well, not right away because Whittingham didn't want to talk about it during camp or during spring training. But yeah, naming him the backup over these 2 other guys, like I mentioned, that does set the expectations really high. he needs to live up to those at some point, and I'm not doubting that he will. I don't want it to come across as I don't think Isaac Wilson is ever going to live up to those expectations. I'm just saying that what I've seen so far through 2 games is he's not looking like he should be the backup quarterback right now. And maybe that just speaks to how bad Brendan Rose and Sam Hewitt have been. I don't know. But I do think the potential is there for Isaac Wilson. That's obviously why he's with the program. Kyle Whittingham sees it, and they all see it over there. So that's why he is in the position that he's in right now, because he does have the potential. And so, yeah, I hope that he can put it together at some point, because I want to see that potential. I'm excited for it.
Absolutely. And I'm right there with you, man. And I mean, we've seen time and time again Utah really develop some of these guys, and it works out really well and down the road, right? Karene Reed, I think they've done a fantastic job with his development. You look at a guy like Cole Bishop, they did a really, really great job with his development. And so I don't doubt this coaching staff has the ability to continue to develop Isaac Wilson, but it does come down to having a better performance against Utah State.
Yeah, I agree. And they've got the weapons. I mean, receivers have had quiet games stat-wise for Utah so far, but there's no doubt that Dorian Singer, Damian Alford, Money Parks, Micah Pittman, Brant Keithy, he's got the weapons.
Absolutely.
Right?
There's no doubt.
He can put it together. So I can't wait to see what Isaac Wilson does this afternoon.
And I mean, in turn, right, if there's any positive to this whole Cam Rising situation, I don't want to overlook Utah State because they're going to be competitive. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tough environment. But this is probably best case scenario for Utah. If Cam's going to be out for a couple of games, this is probably the best case scenario where you can rest him for this one, and then get ready for Big 12 play, because next week is going to be huge for Utah.
Oklahoma State is one of Utah's biggest games of the season.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So they need Cam healthy. We'll see what he looks like. We'll hope those stitches get healed up. We'll talk a little bit more about the Utah State game coming up later, but next we're going to hit our quick 5 minutes of segment. We've got a lot to talk about still, got a little bit of time to talk about everything, so we'll hit that coming up next. This is the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Christian Esparza and Alex Napolis. Alex, it's time for 5 minutes of. We've got so much that we haven't really touched on yet in today's show. So little time to do it, so we're just kind of going to rapid fire.
And we'll start with Mountain West.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's get into it. Okay, so the Pac-12 is back. It was informally referred to as the Pac-2, with Oregon State and Washington State being the lone survivors after everybody left. Saying it out loud, it's kind of crazy to think everybody left that conference. It left just Oregon State and Washington State for 2 seasons, but they are making a comeback. The Pac-12 announced that starting July 1st, 2026, they are going to officially add 4 more schools, all from the Mountain West Conference. That will be Colorado State, San Diego State, Boise State, and Fresno State.
I mean, look, ultimately it's going to be good for the Pac-12, but I mean, where does this leave the Mountain West?
Yeah, well, so the Mountain West is still, they meet the requirements to be a conference, right? But they're losing. San Diego State was a founding member. I believe Colorado State was as well. And then Boise State has been a powerhouse there for the last 10-plus seasons, right? So those are some big-time programs leaving the Mountain West. What I think is funny is all these schools are staying together, joining a conference that only had 2 teams. So it's basically going to be the Mountain West still.
Right.
So that's what's funny to me. We mentioned it earlier in the show. This new Pac-12 conference still needs 2 more teams. You need 8 teams to be an NCAA conference. So they still need 2 more teams to meet that requirement. Keep an eye out. I think they're going to be looking east. Memphis is a target that I've seen rumored to join this Pac-12. I think that would be a little weird because they would lose the regionality aspect that made the Pac-12 unique.
You know what I think happens, Christian?
What do you think happens?
And this is pure speculation. This isn't coming from anybody or anything. This is just what I think is going to happen. I do think that the Pac-12 adds a couple more schools from the Mountain West. They do end up
from the Mountain West.
From the Mountain West, they do end up stealing a little bit. potentially, like we were talking about UNLV. They obviously will pick off maybe a couple schools from the other conferences, but when this whole realignment thing happened, when the Pac-12 was dissolved, and when the Big 12 stole a bunch of schools from the American Athletic Conference, schools were promoted. FCS schools were promoted to the FBS level, right? Sam Houston, Kennesaw State, a couple others here and there. Kennesaw State, different conference, but still they were promoted to the FBS level. So I do think the Mountain West ends up rebuilding by maybe taking some of these better FCS schools and brings them up to the FBS level.
And that's interesting that you bring that up. I brought that up on Jake and Ben, and at first they didn't really like the idea, but then I think they kind of warmed up to it. Again, the Mountain West does not need to add more teams. They do meet the requirement, but if they choose to do so, and they definitely can, it would not hurt to kind of strengthen the conference after losing some big-time programs.
Right.
And if that does happen, I'd look at Montana State and Montana in the Big Sky. Again, they fit right there in the footprint of the Mountain West. They kind of fit the tough, gritty brand that the Mountain West represents. Obviously, Montana and Montana State, not huge markets. I don't know what the benefits of adding them would be. I'm not really here to get into all that. I'm just saying purely from a football standpoint, because that's what matters most in collegiate athletics. Those are two of the better FCS football teams, and they have been.
Right.
And the other thing is, if you add one, you got to add both because of their rivalry.
Yes.
And the Mountain West needs a rivalry like that, especially after losing their rivalry with Colorado State and Wyoming. They need to have a premier rivalry. So I think that could be really fun for the Mountain West to kind of dip into those waters.
I'm for it. If we can get Montana State and Montana, that rivalry, to be at an FBS level in the Mountain West, I would absolutely love that, man. And, I mean, like I said, we've seen it before. Teams from the FCS level getting promoted up to the FBS level, joining these conferences, joining the group of five. I can definitely see the Mountain West take, especially considering that statement that was brought out by their commissioner, Gloria Nevarez. After kind of reading that, I kind of got that feeling that the Mountain West doesn't want to go anywhere. They don't want to, they want to continue to be a conference. They want to continue to be competitive. And what better way to do that than to, if you're losing schools, rebuild a little bit with some of these FCS schools, some of the better FCS schools in the, like you mentioned, the Big Sky.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I pulled up a little bit of what Navarez said in response to all the reports and stuff. She said the requirements of the scheduling agreement will apply to the Pac-12 should they admit Mountain West members. That's referring to the scheduling agreement, having to play Oregon State and Washington State.
Right.
Our board of directors is meeting to determine our next steps. The Mountain West has a proud 25-year history and will continue to thrive in the years ahead. So I do think that's interesting because sitting and doing nothing would not be thriving.
Right.
I really am interested to see what the Mountain West does next.
I would, like I said, I'd absolutely love to see them bring up some of these FCS schools and continue to have Mountain West football. I think Mountain West football is fun, and especially in the case where like Utah State stays in that conference.
Yeah.
I think it's important for schools like Utah State to continue to be competitive in a conference like the Mountain West that right now is getting picked apart.
Yeah, it sucks getting left out, but all Utah State can do is stay behind and help rebuild the Mountain West.
Exactly.
Let's move on to RSL. They played tonight. They had, a week off?
They did,
Is that right?
They had the international break last week, so there was no game. But now they head down to Houston, a very tough environment to play, a place where Rouse Lake have not won since 2018. And
oh my gosh, I didn't realize it had been that long.
Yeah, and last time we were down in Houston wasn't the best of performances from Rouse Lake.
So RSL is tied for third place in the Western Conference. They have 47 points. Oh, excuse me, not tied. I was looking at something else. They sit alone at third place behind LA Galaxy and LAFC. They've been at third for quite a while, and you think, I guess with not too much longer remaining in the season, would you expect them to make the playoffs as kind of a third seed, the number 3 seed, or do you think they have room to rise?
I think that has to be the goal. You have to be a top 3 team, especially with the season you've had. The reality is, Christian, Rouse Lake are in a rut.
Yeah, they have not been.
They have not been the best team in the last couple of weeks. It's a little bit distorted because they have had so much. They've had a lot of time off in the last 3 months, but the reality is they've only won 2 games in the last 6 matches. not the best of results for Real Salt Lake. They are in a little bit of a rut. Going down to Houston, a place where you're struggling to win, and against a team that you haven't really beat and had a good result against in a minute, it's going to be a tough environment. It's going to be a tough place to play, but 3 points are so important for Real Salt Lake because we talk about them, being a top wanting to finish them in a top three spot. But you look at teams like Colorado, who are right under them, and a team like Seattle, who's right under them. If Real Salt Lake loses and Colorado wins and Seattle wins, Colorado jumps them on the table. Real Salt Lake fall to 4th, and Seattle's at 1 point right behind them.
It is big trying to get that second win in a row. Of course, they're coming off a win against New England a couple weeks ago. Alex, they have not won back-to-back matches since they beat Houston earlier this year, and then they beat Atlanta the next week. So that was the beginning of July. And now they did have the League Cup break and then the international break. So they've had a lot of time off in that span, but it has been so long since we've seen RSL win back-to-back matches. Let's see if they can get back on track tonight. Again, first kick is at 6:30. The pregame show will be at 5:30 tonight here on The Zone. And let's wrap up 5 minutes of talking a little bit about NFL. We had a big division rival matchup Thursday night. It was Buffalo at Miami, and oh my gosh, Buffalo, are they back or what? They beat Miami 31-10. Miami couldn't do anything. Of course, Tua Tagovailoa left the game because of a concussion, but even while he was in there, he really struggled. I think he finished the game with 2 or 3 picks on the day and couldn't get his guys involved.
Well, first of all, man, we wish nothing but the best for Tua.
Yeah.
A very scary situation. Again, getting yet another concussion. It didn't look good after he took that hit. Scary scenes there in Miami. We wish nothing but the best for Tua. We hope he's okay. But to answer your question, Christian, Buffalo looks good.
Yeah.
Buffalo looks good, and Buffalo looks scary. I think a lot of people maybe, I don't want to necessarily say wrote them off, considering how much turnover and how much changes they had in their roster.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I kind of did.
But they look good, man.
Yeah.
They look good, and I think their division will continue to be run by Buffalo. Everything will go through Buffalo. And the question is, can they finally get over that hump? Can they finally get over the Kansas City Chiefs hump down in the playoffs?
Yeah. The defense, they lost in free agency. They lost both starting safeties, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, both guys who had been to Pro Bowls. They lost Trey White, who was at one point an all-pro corner before he kind of dealt with some injuries. But some big losses in free agency, and that defense is already banged up. But I'll tell you, Alex, I couldn't tell on Thursday. They looked like one of the best defenses in the NFL, at least against Miami. And we raved about the BYU defense earlier in the show. And Buffalo's defense looks similar in the fact that no matter where the ball was for Miami, there were always 3 or 4 Buffalo Bills right there just swarming to the ball. They looked fast, they looked aggressive, they looked tough. And it was kind of an interesting change from, a Buffalo defense the last couple of years. That they haven't been bad, but just to think that they lost so many key players and they're still playing this well, that got me really excited.
Honestly, man, coming into this year, I thought maybe Buffalo's Super Bowl window had closed.
After trading away Stephon Diggs and yada, yada.
After all the moves that they made this offseason. But not only did they help themselves in the salary cap with all the moves they made, but they're continuing to be competitive, and they look good.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting, again, just to see if they can obviously sustain this performance, continue this performance on into next week, and continue it on through the season. But right now, Buffalo looks good, and it looks like their window is still wide open.
Yeah. So, and they didn't need a big game from Josh Allen, 139 yards and a touchdown. But he didn't play poorly. I'm just saying that they didn't ask him to do Josh Allen's superhero that we see so often.
No, they let James cook.
Yeah. Nice. But that brings up another interesting point before we wrap up this segment. Passing has been down across the NFL, and it's really interesting. The technical answer why is because since Patrick Mahomes came in, NFL defenses are playing 2 high safeties all the time, so it makes it a lot harder to throw the ball down the field. And that's credit to Patrick Mahomes. Literally changing the way that defenses across the league are playing. But basically, they're forcing you to run the ball. They're forcing the Bills to use James Cook. They're forcing the Dolphins to give Devon Achane 25 carries a game,
Right.
So all these running backs, it's kind of the return of the 90s, right? Where we've got teams playing fullbacks. I mean, the Dolphins gave their fullback a couple carries last night. And workhorse running backs are becoming kind of a thing again. And I think it's really interesting how the NFL shifted away from that, 8 years ago, and then now they're shifting back towards, okay, we'll get our star running back, we'll feed him the ball, and then quarterback, don't turn the ball over, and we'll be good.
It does seem that way. Through the first couple of weeks, it looks like teams are leaning a little bit more on the running backs, which kind of makes the whole running back reshuffle that happened this offseason a little bit more interesting, right? With Joe Mixon going over to Texas, Tony Pollard going to the Titans. There's so many changes in the running backs and starting running backs across the league. Now it's kind of interesting to see how those will shake up for those teams, because they're star running backs that have moved all over the league, and now they're kind of leaning a little bit more towards the running game.
Bengals-Chiefs, one of the games I'm keeping an eye on. I know the Bengals looked really bad last week in a loss to the Patriots, but that is kind of a fun rivalry that we've seen the last couple of years with Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes. T. Higgins probably won't play for the Bengals, but Jamar Chase should be back to 100% of snaps. They kept him on kind of a count after missing a lot of camp with the holdout. Obviously, the Chiefs look really good against the Ravens, so that could be a fun matchup. The Broncos are hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was supposed to be Russell Wilson's return to Denver. Russell Wilson dealing with the calf issue, looking like Justin Fields is going to get the start there. Any other games, Alex, that kind of got you excited for NFL Week 2?
I got my eyes on Texans-Bears. Caleb Williams versus C.J. Stroud.
Last year's number 1 overall pick versus this year's number 1 pick.
Absolutely. I think that one will be super fun. C.J. threw 2 touchdowns in the last game, looked really good. Joe Mixon looked really good. I'm not sold on the Bears.
No.
I'm not. Caleb Williams really didn't do anything in that
Their
opening
offense
game.
didn't score any touchdowns last week.
Exactly. So, interesting game to me, because obviously C.J. versus Caleb, but I do also want to see kind of what Caleb is able to do in Week 2.
Yeah. Another thing I want to point out, and we're really pushing time here, but man, Kirk Cousins looked so bad with the Falcons. He looked stiff, and it really has me worried, because I drafted Drake London in a couple of fantasy leagues.
I started Drake London.
Yeah,
last
I
week.
started him in every league. I mean, I took him in, 3rd or 4th round, so you got to start him, right? And he definitely burned me. So that will be a situation worth monitoring for the next few weeks, is how long is the leash for Kirk Cousins after Atlanta gave him all that money? If he literally physically cannot move in the pocket, how soon do they go to Michael Penix Jr., their first round pick? I believe it was 8th overall. What do you think there? That's kind of a weird deal.
A tough matchup against the Eagles, first of all, this week. Super tough. The Eagles looked really good last week against the Packers, so interesting to see kind of how the Eagles follow up against the Falcons, but I need to see more from them, man. I need to see more from Kirk. I need to see more from the Falcons, and now I think, there was a lot of criticism when they picked Penix in the first round.
Yeah.
Now it's starting to seem. Hey, now it's starting to seem like maybe it was the right move.
Yeah, the wrong move was giving Kirk all that money.
Yeah.
Oh, he looked so. It was literally sickening. Anyways, we'll talk more Utah coming up next. Utah at Utah State kickoff is coming up here pretty shortly, so we'll wrap up the show giving another quick little preview of the Utes at the Aggies. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.